They're very entertaining, different times, great players. Rick and, of course, Wacker and the man who scored that wonderful memory of a bloke running around the oval, Wayne Burgess, and to start it off, Ronnie Gallagher. Another question for you. Stand up if you were a ring-in from another town and played for Dunedoo. Anyone that was a ring-in or is a ring-in? Yeah, a lot of people who came to town came from other places. Some stayed for a week, some stayed for a long, long time. I've got to tell you some of the names that have been mentioned. One of them was Colin Parks, and of course Neil Musgrave, Shane Madden, who's here today, all played with Dubbo Sims, and you'll be very pleased if you're a Dunedoo supporter to know that the green and whites beat Mudgee in Mudgee today. So congratulations to Dubbo Sims, who've been like a senior partner, a Group 11 club, playing in the same colours, and there's been backwards and forwards, and we'll hear from another one. So those who are ring-ins, I should have asked those women and men who've come to town and become a local because they've married a ring-in, but we won't go there just now.
Can you remind them about the silent auction? Can you remind them about the ladies' silent auction?
The ladies' silent auction. That's continuing on. If anyone would like to contribute, that will be announced a little later on. But if you want to have a bid for one of those Guernseys, it's a silent auction, so you can get it for whatever price you're likely to prepare. The Guernseys are over here. And of course that's a wonderful change in our scene, isn't it, to have girls playing in the rugby league. The 80 to 90 area, I would call on Mick Inder, Mick to come forward and say a few words about that period between 1980 and 1990. And Mick's going to take us through that. You've heard the Inder name mentioned in a few areas. Of course, Marnie's brother-in-law. So please, Mick, welcome.
Thanks everyone. My preparation tonight was a bit like my preparation when I was playing footy. It wasn't brilliant, and I'm guessing the end result here tonight's going to be pretty similar as well. My time in footy started in the juniors in the late 80s, I guess it was, with Ron Gallagher as coach. We had a pretty good year then, pretty good group of kids, led by Ron, who's probably I must have been the easiest bloke to coach because I think I played about 10 or 15 years and had about 10 or 15 different coaches. But I think Ron probably clearly the best footy coach that I ever had, which has been mentioned by every other speaker that's been up here. So that says a bit about that part of it. So I transitioned, so the early 90s we were in Group 14. So Steve Funnell was here and Ron was coaching for a couple of years there. It was a pretty strong time early in the 90s, and then Dunedoo went through the NRL clubs called it a rebuilding phase, and I was part of that in the early 90s, and then we switched to the Midwest League, which is second division comp, with just one team in '95, and I reckon we made a couple of grand finals after that, but I think '95 was probably in my opinion anyway, was our best opportunity to have won a grand final. It was a huge comp. There were 16 teams in the comp that year. It was a long year. We started before the NRL, and our grand final was after the week after the NRL grand final. So it was a big year. We had a lot of injuries, and it probably cost us towards the end of that year. We had a real good core of senior players, I guess, that had been through a few hard years, and we had three young kids that just Todd Gallagher, Dale Hogan and Jeremy Stewart come into the side that year, and it was just a really good year, a really good time for the footy club. We made, like I said, we got beaten in a major semi by Lithgow Bears, and only just got beaten with a heap of injuries, and they ended up winning the comp. They won the next week and won the comp, so that was probably a big opportunity. We made in '97 we made the semis again with Tim Brown coach. I'm not going to say Tim Brown was the best footy coach I ever had, because I've already said that about Ron, but he was clearly one of the best blokes I ever played footy with, as far as getting the team together and making everyone have a good time. And it was very good. So the following year, though, Mick Dunn turned up with a couple of a couple extra guys, made the grand final at Minnaway that year and got rolled. We had a big lead early and blew it. I don't remember heaps about the game, but I was just talking to David Brennan about this. I do remember one incident at half-time. There was a guy who played a couple of games with us during the year, and he had a few drinks during the game, and he came in at half-time offering his advice on what we were doing wrong. And I know Ron, he was involved there, and he was trying to get him out of the shed. It was a bit of a dog's breakfast, really. Anyway, we found out the next day, we were having a few beers the next day, that Johnny Brennan had got wind of this guy, and Johnny, who would have been in his mid-50s at the time, took him outside and just taught him a few manners, I think was what the story I heard, and anyway, the problem was solved. During those years, my football memories on the field, a bit blurry, tend to head knocks I think, but I remember lots about things after the game, and I remember we played Blackheath in those years, which was a big trip obviously, and so we often stayed the night at Blackheath, and I remember, well the club organised accommodation for us all. It was a pretty big deal, and I remember the week leading up to that, so training consisted of all of us just talking about how great it was going to be in Blackheath that night, going the boys in the bush, going to the big smoke, which we thought it was down there. Not much mention of the footy. And come Saturday at Blackheath, well that sort of showed. We played footy like under 10s I reckon, got flogged, and we partied like, I don't know, like guys that had just won their 10th grand final in a row that night. I remember one guy at the bar said, "Thank Christ you blokes didn't win, you would have tore this joint down." Judy did ask me to mention a couple of players that I play with. I reckon it's really difficult to name guys, but I think Todd Gallagher, Chris Carney and Cole Roberts during that era were our go-to guys. If you had those three guys most weeks, you didn't have to contribute much to yourself. With those three guys are there and you were going to have a pretty good result. And Todd still got it. Saw it today. Don't know why he's not playing first grade. I just want to mention, it's a bit of a funny story, and he hasn't been mentioned yet. Our bus driver back in that era was Nuke Hoggan, and I know he was president of the club in the late 80s and was always involved with footy. But I just remember one bus trip, well there was lots of bus trips with Nuke, with the stories, but the one in particular when we went to Coonabarra. So footy clubs, I've got it written here, footy clubs are built on character, and there was no bigger character in the 90s than Nuke Hoggan. We were on our way to Coona for a game and had to go by a cooler to pick a few guys up from there. Time was getting away, we were running a bit late, so coming from Coola, approaching the Newell Highway at the T intersection, just south of Coona, that's where the fun started. Nuke was reluctant to give way to an oncoming B-double heading north along the Newell, and casually pulled out in front of him. There were two lanes, and clearly it wasn't our time that day, as the truck took one lane and Nuke took the other. It gets worse. So Cole Roberts, he was sitting in the back of the bus that day, and it was frightening. So Cole was quite quick. So Cole thought he could outrun the impending impact of the truck tearing up the arse of the bus. So he raced to the front of the bus. And by this point he was pretty much sitting on Nuke's lap. And then the truck sort of sped past the bus, nearly knocked the mirrors off the bus. And Nuke looked at Cole and said he had more room than we had time. Anyway, they were good times. Footy's it's a great get-together. The guys that are playing now, you don't appreciate it when you're playing, but the influence you guys have on little kids, just don't underestimate that. So, I remember when I was a kid, Birdie was my man. I just loved watching Birdie play, and I'm sure there was kids I remember Tommy Yo and Mark Stanford and that group. They were ball boys and kids when we were playing, and there's a group of kids now that are 12, 14, 15, 16-year-old that are the nucleus of the club down the track that are looking at you guys that are playing now for inspiration. So I just love you to bear that in mind while you're doing the stuff out there. Right, thanks very much. I'll leave it there.